One of the facts of American life these days is that many prescription drugs are now household names.
Both doctors and the public want to reach for the newest prescription drug.
You can't sit down to TV at night and not see a half a dozen drug company commercials.
Millions of Americans watch the ads and then ask their doctors for prescriptions.
The reason we're seeing so much consumer advertising is because it works.
They do it by telling people, ask your doctor.
They can sell us almost anything.
A 4-year-old Rochester boy is recovering tonight after nearly dying after being vaccinated for H1N1.
His parents, though, don't want their situation to stop others from getting this vaccine. News Center's Jennifer Hoff is live in our newsroom with more. I can't imagine anything more frightening than this, Jennifer.
Well, the dad, Kadmar Akara, says his preschooler started showing symptoms shortly after getting that shot Tuesday from the Mayo Northeast Family Clinic. Now, first, Mecha Akara said he felt weak and that his head and stomach hurt. Dad is a nurse and gave his son Motrin. It wasn't until Mecha threw up a number of times later that night that Dad said he knew it was serious. Mecha also said he had the shakes, a fever around 99 degrees, and eventually became unresponsive. Dad then performed CPR.
I'd looked up this vaccine a little bit before the kids went in for that, and they said it was very safe, and they've had flu shots before. They said it's a similar vaccine. They've never had this kind of reaction to the flu shot.
Now, the Centers for Disease Control says the H1N1 vaccine, like any medicine, could cause a serious allergic reaction, but the risk of causing serious harm or death is extremely small. Signs of a reaction include hives, weakness, or difficulty breathing.
We've taken no shortcuts in terms of safety, and we're rigorously monitoring for any potential problems with the vaccine.
Now, Kadma Akara hopes his story reminds parents to fully investigate the H1N1 vaccine.
I'd looked up this vaccine a little bit before the kids went in for that, and they said it was very safe, and they've had flu shots before. They said it's a similar vaccine. They've never had this kind of reaction to the flu shot.
Recovering tonight after nearly dying after being vaccinated for H1N1.
His parents, though, don't want their situation to stop others from getting this vaccine. News Center's Jennifer Hoff is live in our newsroom with more. I can't even...
We have healthcare professionals who have committed potentially acts of treason within their medical ethics. And there's nobody supervising that. There's nobody making them stand accountable to their medical ethics.
We have been pressured and coerced to pass drugs of questionable safety, including the RBST. I personally was very concerned that there's a very serious problem of secrecy, conspiracy, and things of that nature, and something needs to be done.
The FDA was then on the hot seat. They had to come up with an answer. They didn't come up with a good one. And they never took the opportunity then. I mean, what would they do? Pull it off the market and say we need to now do the job that we didn't do the first time? They didn't do that.
We wrote the story. We had it ready a week beforehand. They had bought ads.
Farmers in the milk industry say it's safe. The study suggests a link to cancer. Don't miss this special report from the investigators.
That Friday night before the Monday the series was to begin, the fax machine spit out a letter from this very high-priced lawyer in New York that Monsanto had hired. It contained a lot of things that were just off-the-wall false, just demonstrably false. But if you didn't know the story and you didn't know how we had gone about producing it, would have scared you as a broadcaster, as a manager.
And they decided that they would pull the story and they would just check it one more time.
But the bottom line was that there was no factual errors in that story. Both sides had been heard from. Both sides had had an opportunity to speak.
1 week later, Monsanto sent the second letter, and this was even more strongly worded. And it said there will be dire consequences for Fox News if the story airs in Florida. And this time they freaked. They were afraid of being sued, and they were also afraid of losing advertising dollars at all of the stations owned by Rupert Murdoch. And he owned more television stations than any other group in America. And that's 22 television stations. That's a lot of advertising dollars for Roundup, aspartame, NutraSweet, and other products.
So we got into a battle. And the first deal was the new general manager.
And his name's Dave. And Dave is a salesman, and, you know, he'd pump your hand. How you doing? How you doing?
Called us upstairs to his office, and he said, what would you say if I killed this piece? What if it never ran? And we said, well, you know, we wouldn't be very happy about that. And he said, well, I could kill it, you know. And we said, yes, of course, you're the manager. You could kill it. It would never air. And he's hemming and he's hawing and he's back and he's forth. And we couldn't figure out, what is this all about? And finally he blurted out, look, would you tell anybody? You know, I said, I'm not going to lie for you. About a week later, calls us back to the office and says, okay, we'd like you to make these changes. In fact, you will make these changes. We said, well, look, let us show you the research that we have that shows that this information you want us to broadcast isn't true. To which he replies, I don't care about that. I said, pardon me? And he said, well, that's what I have lawyers for. Just write it the way the lawyers want it written. I said, you know, this is news. This is important. This is stuff people need to know. And I'll never forget, he didn't pause a beat, and he said, we just paid $3 billion for these television stations. We'll tell you what the news is. The news is what we say it is. I said, I'm not doing that. And he said, well, he said, if you refuse to present the story the way we think it should be presented, you'll be fired for insubordination. I said, I will go to the Federal Communications Commission and I will report that I was fired from my job by you, the licensee of these public airwaves, because I refused to lie to people on the air. And it's thank you very much. You'll hear from us right away. Well, 24 hours came and went, and we didn't hear a thing. And about a week later, he calls us back, and now we've changed strategies. How about if
is simply corrupt and really has to end. It's portrayed as education, but it's marketing in disguise. And I think the more consumers learn about that sort of corruption, the more people will want to know that their doctor is not taking part. And indeed, many doctors have stopped accepting all the rorts and the perks and the free dinners and the free trips, but not enough. And the bottom line result is that money influences prescribing habits. This sort of largesse, these dinners, this influences prescribing habits. Why on earth would drug companies spend the billions that they do on this sort of marketing if it didn't work? Sometimes that influence is very valuable. If we're talking about life-saving drugs like HIV drugs, getting to people who really need them. But a lot of the wining and dining in fancy restaurants going on in Australia and elsewhere around the world now is not about getting essential medicines to people who are facing severe illness. It's about getting unnecessary treatments to the wealthy health.
The next thing to observe is how much money this industry spends on marketing and administration. Last year that was $73 billion, or 32% of sales revenue. A lot of money. The same year, research and development accounted for only $37 billion. Now, $37 billion is a lot of money, but it's only half what these companies spent on marketing and administration, and less even than they retained in profits after all of their expenses. This is the smallest of the three main budgetary items. Can't help but think that there are millions of Americans who are taking drugs that they probably don't need and may be even harmful. That they're being convinced, and their doctors are being convinced, that they should take lifelong drugs that probably
are of no net benefit and may be of net benefit.